I think there's a deep link here between your comment that I've now restructured my prior beliefs, um, and and this notion that emotions control the confidence or the mutability or the transformability of those prior beliefs. Because if I now
Yes.
relax my priors over certain convictions, say that I am very unfit and I'm unlikely to change this, finish this race, I may hold that conviction very, very precisely. But if I now can get into a frame of mind that relaxes the precision of that particular belief, and the possibility that I am a fit person and can finish this this particular race, and therefore that now becomes a plausible intentional goal, for example, and realizing that goal now reinforces or relaxes the precision, the conviction, the confidence ascribed to this can't do kind of approach.
It gives us a sense that maybe if we don't like some aspects of our life now or some elements of our identity, that it really is, and this is supported by, the best biology and neuroscience theories, that it really is in our control to be able to change them over time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. And you're not going to wake up tomorrow and just, rejig all of your prediction models and suddenly you're a perfectly confident person. But it is fully coherent with the best ideas on how your brain stores and generates these models, that you can change them over time through consistent action and through consistent psychological change.
Yeah.
I wonder, in the future, will we really figure out how this works better than we do now and figure out how to update those models more efficiently, like what it is exactly that shifts models. Like, I have an idea that particularly salient emotional moments, like extremely emotionally salient moments, seem to have a model shifting ability that is like nothing else. It's sort of a marker to your physiology that this is important. Whenever I have done like a big triathlon or one of those big races that I trained for a long time and I finished, there's something about like the emotional derivative of thinking you're going to die halfway through the race and then finishing, that afterwards you can get these very big changes in your personality. You can really think about yourself very fundamentally different, and I think it has something to do with like a very big emotional salient moment, but then it's updating your priors and changing those generative models, and it seems to shift it a lot. Does this sound right to you, or have you thought about this at all?
Yes. No. I have indeed, and of course, a lot of what you say would resonate with people like Mark Soames, and I mean that because it's not only, I think, important to understand the mechanisms of that ability to change. What you're talking about is technically the ability to relearn your generative model if you want to be a different kind of person or your environment changes. Um, that ability to relearn becomes absolutely crucial in the context of psychiatry and neurology. So
Right.
it's not just about well-being; it's also about how you would remediate somebody who's become stuck in their ways, um, or has now to now go through a grieving process, for example. So I liked your emphasis on the fact it's not easy. Grieving isn't easy, but grieving
Yes.
simply is the relearning of your world model that's fit for purpose for this new world, this new niche, eco niche, this emotional eco niche or cultural eco niche, in the absence of something that you have lost, possibly a loved one or some status or a job or house, whatever it might be. So, the learning is not easy. And sometimes, from a therapeutic perspective, it's really important to understand what are the mechanisms that you can appeal to or leverage to make that kind of learning easier. And the way that you describe that, I think, sort of gives you, the way that you described the fact that you change your model of yourself when exposed to um, um, an emotionally salient event. I think I think that is an important insight, because what you'd be looking for from a therapeutic angle is to try and reproduce that kind of transformative experience that enables new learning in a therapeutic context, whether it's a dyadic therapy or whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy or just counseling of some kind. You are looking for a way of enabling that kind of relearning. And I think most people technically would focus on the control of the precision that we were talking about before. So when we were talking before about being in different emotional states, I am elated. I've done a wonderful run, and I haven't died, and I am now a true and perfect specimen of humanhood. So that was, I'm a winner. That was you inferring this is my state of mind at the moment. Now that has consequences. You can't infer anything that cannot be predicted, and of course, once you infer it, you're predicting. So, what are the consequences here of being a winner and a perfect specimen of in your instance, manhood? Then that's going to be largely attentional. And it's going to basically change the confidence you ascribe to various sensory evidences and prior beliefs. So I think there's a deep link here between your comment that I've now restructured my prior beliefs, and this notion that emotions control the confidence or the mutability or the transformability of those prior beliefs. Because if I now relax my priors over certain convictions, saying that I am very unfit and I'm unlikely to finish this race, I may hold that conviction very, very precisely. But if I now can get into a frame of mind that relaxes the precision of that particular belief, and the possibility that I am a fit person and can finish this particular race, and therefore that now becomes a plausible intentional goal, for example, and realizing that goal now reinforces or relaxes the precision, the conviction, the confidence ascribed to this can't do kind of approach. So, my point here is, your question about can we understand, will we understand? I think it's actually quite a pressing question, because it will be at the heart of many assisted therapies that people like Mark Sovens and a whole host of people ranging from physiotherapists through to psychotherapists will want to understand in order to make the most of the different therapeutic tools at hand, not forgetting, of course, pharmacological tools. So there are ways of reproducing these states of minds chemically by adjusting those, by ingesting drugs that will affect the neuropharmacology, the neurochemical status of the brain that encodes the precision of your precision weighted prediction errors. So understanding the mechanics of all this is I think very important from that translational clinical perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Really well said. I think what comes to mind and what might come to mind for a lot of listeners there is psychedelics. My understanding of what psychedelics are really doing on one level. Of course, they're doing a lot of things in the brain, but I think one of them is that they seem to relax those priors, the boundary constraints that you have around your life that you've built up over time, but maybe haven't questioned consciously in a long time. Like, why do I make this social comparison with my friend who's making 100 grand, but he's in a job he hates, versus me who's in a job I love, but I make 150 amount? And, why am I doing any of these social games or short-term games? I think those are sort of priors that almost society kind of has ingrained in us without noticing. But then once you try psychedelics, they all kind of, dissolve. They, like, the ego literally dissolves and all of that just goes away. How much do we understand about how psychedelics are sort of interacting with the brain and the free energy principle, and how much do we understand about how that's actually happening in different parts of the brain? Where is it happening? Has there been good studies done there?
Yeah, well, there is a wealth. not claiming that it is fully understood. This is an entire research program. There are people like Robin Carhart-Harris actually have whole laboratories and groups devoted to this issue. There are whole institutions looking at the mechanisms of assisted psychotherapy, particularly using psychedelics. So this is a really important area. A lot is understood through the lens of the free energy principle and active inference, but there is an enormous amount yet to understand. But just to sort of just stand back and just take an overview and to try and explain via this conversation why this is such an important question. Notice that all the drugs that we use to change our mood and sometimes sense making in the context of psychosis and hallucinations and delusions, for example, just noting that hallucinations and delusions are very simple examples of false inference that would inherit from getting the precision wrong. So if I ascribe too much precision to my sensory information, then I may have to explain away things that were anomalous and very easily start to suffer from false inferences. False inferences like inferring something is there when it is not, for example, hallucination and delusion, or inferring something is not there when it is. And I've just described neglect syndromes and dissociative syndromes, what would have been called hysterical syndromes in the old days. So these are canonical and very wide-ranging examples of false inference that ensue from getting the precision wrong. Why is that important to understand? Well, if you understand the mechanisms of precision, or how we encode uncertainty or confidence, how we grease the right pathways, how we equip certain sources of sensory evidence with preferential access to belief updating, then we can understand how to intervene in it. And the mechanistic understanding here, physiologically, is that you literally are increasing the excitability of certain brain cells, parts of the brain, that are broadcasting the prediction errors that are causing the belief updating. And this requires an increase in the neuromodulation of the sensitivity or excitability of these neuronal populations, which immediately tells you you're talking about certain brain chemicals involved in neuromodulatory controls, such as dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, noradrenaline, and so on. I mention that because all the drugs that are used in neurology and psychiatry, all of them act upon, directly or indirectly, one or more of those neurotransmitter systems, including psychedelics. So psychedelics is a 5-HT2A agonist, which is a serotonergic receptor. So you know immediately that that's going to have some effect on your sense making, because we know that serotonin reuptake inhibitors also act upon the serotonergic system. We know that's deeply implicated in mood and certain pathological emotions and moods associated with, say, generalized anxiety disorder or depression of a non-psychotic sort. So we now have quite a good mechanistic understanding of why psychedelics might work. Well, what they are doing is they are, exactly as you say, getting into the brain in a way that selectively reduces the excitability of certain neuronal systems or populations, reporting prediction errors deep in a hierarchy at the level of self-modeling and priors and narratives about what's going to happen today and what kind of person am I, how should I respond to this, that would oblige you to compare your salary with that of a work colleague who had a different set of apparent priorities. So resolving and relaxing those priors by selectively targeting receptors, the specific receptors that psychedelics act upon, in order to emphasize more the precision or attention afforded lower level constructs, you now can see immediately how that perturbation or neuromodulation of that hierarchical or computational anatomy can lead now to a kind of sense making that's more pointing towards and more constrained and driven by the sensory input, by the sensorial, and no longer is constrained or tethered by the narratives that pertain to these, deeply held convictions, and sometimes literally stuck in a rut in the sense of being stuck in um, a, a sharp valley of free energy that you can't get out of, because the precision also mathematically describes the steepness of the valleys as we wander through our counterfactual futures, or indeed sense making. So very often this sort of the mechanism of action of things like psychedelics is literally to relax surprise by opening up the space, the landscape of beliefs and thoughts and narratives and sense making, so that you can now access other ways of being, and that I am like this and I've always been like this is no longer the constraint that it has upon lower level sense making. So you can start to engage with the sensorial, with the elemental features. It just doesn't matter anymore. So I think that it's a really important notion that if you come through therapy, possibly pharmacotherapy, relax those priors, you're now putting people in a position where they can now relearn. It doesn't solve the problem of what you're going to have to help them relearn. You have to help them win their race. You have to help them sort of challenge this notion that I am stuck in an overpaid, overvalued but not enjoyable job. You have to give them alternative hypotheses, and of course that's where the sort of the talking therapy comes in, or the experiential therapy, the cognitive behavioral therapy comes in. So the drug in and of itself is certainly going to take the pressure off your prior convictions in and of the moment, opening up, giving yourself a latitude for different ways of being, or at least modeling yourself, or exploring other self-narratives, but it doesn't in and of itself tell you what other hypotheses you could explore. And of course, that's it's the job of your counselor or your psychotherapist.
Yeah, beautifully explained. I love the visual metaphors of landscapes and valleys. And in general, in biology, I think they work so well to describe phenomena. I think they worked so well there. If you put both of us into a brain scanner, an fMRI, or something similar, I know you did really seminal work in neuroimaging a few decades ago, and we both did LSD, and we were both having some experience of relaxed priors about really deep realizations. Would there be continuity between the patterns in our brains of those priors being relaxed? Are they encoded sort of in similar ways, or would there be no reason to assume that my priors are encoded in a very contextually specific way for me, and yours in a completely different way? Or might you see patterns between brains?
No, you'd certainly see patterns between brains at a particular scale. So clearly, your generative model and my generative model are not the same. Your generative model has installed all your experiences and also all your the gift of evolution, all your genetic and epigenetic inheritance, and mine likewise. So we are completely unique. So at the level of individual structures and the wiring of our brains, all of us are completely unique. However, the notion of a generative model as something that is optimized in relation to model evidence means that the structure of your generative model somehow installs the cause-effect structure of your lived world, of your niche. And that means because you and I basically share a lot of our, of our at least sensed worlds. In fact, we're literally sharing our sense world right now. But more generally, the cause-effect structures of the worlds that we inhabit are formally very, very similar. That means that our brains have to be structurally very similar. And indeed, you can sort of take evolutionary arguments, treating natural selection as Bayesian model selection by maximizing the Bayesian model evidence as another, if you like, explanation for why our brains are so similar. It's just another aspect of this free energy minimizing process. That includes the levels at which deeper priors live and the nature of those priors. So, for example, the front of the brain is usually more preoccupied or involved in representing the consequences of action. So it's a doing part of the brain, whereas the back of the brain is more, to a certain extent, more concerned with sense making and sort of perception. And you're as you go right to the back, it's sort of visual sense making. To the sides, it's more at the cortical level, it's more auditory input. So there's this sort of macroscopic anatomy to this absolutely concern between you and me. And that anatomy also includes where your precision, where your relaxation of priors may or may not occur in response to a drug and some sensory stimuli. Which means that I would fully expect that if you and I were put into, into functional magnetic resonance imaging scanners, or indeed EEG studies looking at faster electrical signals, I would fully expect that the broad patterns of where our landscape had been flattened, where we sort of relaxed our priors, would be very, very similar between our two brains. And indeed, this is probably over answering, but is it interesting to note that the precision that is afforded, the prediction errors, can also be thought of as a rate constant. So when you think about belief updating, that is a process that happens in time. So if I increase the precision of a prediction error here, that means it has a greater influence on the rate of change of me as a neuron that represents some expectation or some belief about hidden states in the world, which means that I'm going to accumulate evidence more quickly, which means I'm changing my mind more quickly on the basis of precise information. That means that the metabolic cost of that belief updating through some fundamental thermodynamic physics principles will be higher. And I have to pay that cost by activating my brain, for example, increasing the blood supply. So you can regard most of the activations in functional magnetic resonance imaging, and I would argue most of electrophysiological recordings, as simply scoring where have you deployed your precision. So the hotspots you see on statistical parametric maps or brain scans of a statistical sort are literally reporting those parts of the brain that have been equipped with a high degree of precision and are doing a lot of belief updating very, very quickly using energy via the Janinski equality or Landauer's principle. It can't be any other way from the point of view of physics. So what I'd expect to see, and indeed one does see this to a certain extent, is a suppression of activity in the parts of the brain that are replete with or have high density 5-HT2A receptors, which include these parts of the brain and some parts of the brain here, very high in the hierarchy, sometimes associated with what people call a default mode, or an intrinsic brain network that is preoccupied with or is involved in perspective taking and introspection. Conversely, I'd expect you to have a heightened sensitivity to be attending to any extraceptive signals. And if I was showing you a movie and you were on LSD or psilocybin, I'd expect quite a lot of stuff to be going on, and that would be recognized through your brain imaging as sort of appropriate low-level cortical responses that have been engendered by this particular kind of stimuli.
The Giant Shoulder mission is to explore radical ideas in biology, neuroscience, and consciousness, and elevate those stories to the highest possible level while keeping them accessible to everyone. If this interests you and you want to support independent science, then please consider subscribing to the Clips channel. Check out our 26 Neuroscience book. You can download it for free